Hi folks, hope you're well and your GRE prep is going swimmingly. As I alluded in the previous video, the RC strategy we will employ is the half and half strategy. The first half of the half and half strategy focuses on the reading passage itself. There are several strategies relating to that which we will cover in this video. Strategy 1 is to mentally classify the reading comprehension passage into type within the first one or two sentences as you start reading the passage. The reason this is important is typically what you will find is that the majority of the reading comprehension passages on the GRE will touch one of these topics. I will have a module that will deep dive into strategy number 1 in future videos. But at this point, it suffices to say that as you practice, ensure that you get exposure to reading comprehension passages that span topics so that you have some background and context when you encounter a new GRE passage on the exam that will fit into one of these slots. Talking of slots, at this point, I'd like to mention US history. As you can see in this list of topics, US history has 4 subtopics, which cover the civil rights movement, the Civil War, feminism, and slavery. In a future video, I'm going to deep dive into each of these topics to give you more context so you're better prepared when you see a related passage on the GRE. But for now, keep in mind that the GRE does focus quite a bit on US history, and having a sense of these 4 important US history topics will definitely give you an advantage as you take the GRE. I also plan to upload future videos which will cover the reading comprehension passages which span all of these topics so that you can get additional practice. An example illustrating the use of strategy 1 is shown here. As you start reading this, you will notice that there are at least 3 words which give you a clue as to which topic this passage belongs to. Recorded sound began as much a visual and textual concern as an auditory one. Right in the first sentence, you have the word sound and you have a synonym for sound, which is auditory. Therefore, you have 2 words which mean the same thing, which have already given you the clue that this has to do something with sound. Reading on, from its inception, the phenomenon necessarily relied upon the act, via the medium of a vibrating surface, of converting sound waves into physical motion. Notice the word sound came again. At this point, I am 2 sentences into the passage and I know that this has something to do with sound. So the category this reading comprehension passage should fall into is going to most likely have something to do with music. Let's move on to strategy 2. This strategy is about staying focused and attentive by keeping track of continuity words and turn words as you read the GRE reading comprehension passage. These words either continue the flow of thought in the passage or reverse or contrast the flow. Therefore, these can act as signposts or milestones to keep you attentive and focused in GRE passages as you read them. Such words typically occur at the beginning of sentences. Some examples of continuity words are moreover, thus, therefore, for example. And some turn words are however and while. Going back to the passage, as you read this passage, you will realize that there are no explicit continuity or turn words at the beginning of any sentence. This can actually mean good news. Most likely by default, when you do not find any continuity or turn words at the beginning of sentences, most likely there is only one single flow of thought that is happening throughout the passage. Therefore, most likely this passage has more bias towards continuity than towards turn. Now, most likely this is good news because that means you don't have to keep track of changes in thought. Now, there is a strategy, which is strategy number 8 later on in this video, which is called the bifurcation strategy, which actually kicks in if you find that there are turn words in the passage. Therefore, applying the strategy and proactively reading the passage is very, very helpful. The third key strategy to stay attentive and to keep track of things as you read the RC passage is to mentally identify what the pronouns are referring to. For example, pronouns are typically words like it, this, and that. To illustrate this strategy through an example, going back to our reading comprehension passage, you'll find that these words have been highlighted. The reason this is very critical is because it helps you relate to what exactly the author is referring to and helps you organize all the different concepts in this strategy in your mind together. It helps you organize all the ideas that the passage is trying to convey and link them together in a chain mentally so that you do not get confused and you have a framework and structure to hang all your ideas and thoughts on. If you start reading this passage in sentence 2, from its inception, the phenomenon. When you come across the word its, at this point you have to identify and tie it to something more concrete. What does it refer to here? Clearly, it here refers to the phenomenon. And the phenomenon that they're talking of here is the auditory as well as the visual and textual concern of the recorded sound. Similarly, when you read the sentence, probably the earliest practical examples of such recording apparatus. Such here is referring to an apparatus in the previous sentence, which converts sound waves into physical motion and a subsequent action of inscription. So you are trying to chain or link these pronouns back to the previous sentences where they were referred to. Therefore, keeping all these associations clear in your head. Continuing down the passage, patented in 1857, it comprised. It here refers to the phone autograph. The phone autograph was referred to in the previous sentence. So as you're reading this sentence, you know exactly what this whole sentence is referring to. Scott D. Martinville conceived the marks produced as a form of auto-stenography, where the inflections and intonations of an individual's speech might be read by anyone with the required patience to learn this new form of script. This newfound visibility, again the word this is referring to the previous sentence, which is Scott D. Martinville's phone autograph, which he also calls or refers to as autostenography. This newfound visibility of sound fueled much debate between artists, musicians, scientists, and even lawyers about what precisely these scratches and squiggles constituted. These scratches, these, you can refer again back to the previous sentence, which talks about the marks produced. So you can see scratch, a mark, a squiggle is essentially the same thing. These are all synonyms, and this is so typical GRE. I think you get the idea that as you're going through the passage, you will realize that these pronouns can actually help you tie all these thoughts together in a very coherent flow. and this will help you keep all the ideas in the reading comprehension passage organized in your mind. All right, let's move on to strategy number 4. This strategy, at a very high level, helps you make a mental map of all the viewpoints that are being referred to in the RC passage. As an example, consider a book review. If your reading comprehension passage is reviewing a book, you can have at least 3 viewpoints in that passage that you need to be actively tracking and be aware of. The first viewpoint would be the author of the passage itself, so the person who is writing the passage. However, note that the person who is writing the passage could be different than the author of the book. Remember, this is a book review, so the person writing the passage is reviewing the book written by somebody else. And that somebody else could have his own perspective, which can be different than the perspective of the person who is the author of the book and trying to review the book. This is essentially what we call the second order thinking. But wait, you can have a third order thinking here as well. The author of the book could be referring to a third person in the book and his viewpoints. So essentially, at this point, you can see that if you lose track of who is whom and who is referring to whom, you will find that when you see the questions on the GRE relating to this passage, you will be wasting precious time trying to track who exactly that question is referring to. Therefore, in strategy number 4, you have to be very aware and cognizant and keep track of all of these different viewpoints as you're reading. Now, believe me, this is not easy, and I'm not saying it is easy. But if you are aware of these strategies and you practice, you will realize that after a few months of practice, all of these subconsciously get processed by your brain, and your performance on the reading comprehension questions actually improves. Strategy number 5. As you're reading through the reading comprehension passage, be attentive to words that are in italics or quotes, as well as any question marks or other punctuations. Note that the GRE reading comprehension passages have been curated. The test maker at ETS has spent a lot of time cutting and pasting and creating a very dense piece of material for you to read. So every sentence has some information or clue. Therefore, unlike normal reading, this is a very concentrated form of academic writing. If you think about this on a lighter note, an example is beer versus whiskey. Beer is actually the diluted form. If you take beer and start concentrating it, it becomes very strong and becomes whiskey. Think about the normal readings that you do in the newspaper or any article online to be like beer. It's a lot of different thoughts, not really concentrated, so it's okay to skip a sentence or two or miss the meaning of a sentence or two. But in the GRE, because it has been concentrated and distilled by the ETS, what you will find is that just like whiskey, it is really, really strong. And you have to be very careful and sip it gently and slowly in order to completely absorb the material. And therefore, these punctuation marks and other features of the passage are very, very critical. Applying this to the example passage, you can see that there are several punctuations and words that are in italics or in quotations. I will have a dedicated video that will go through each of these and cover the import of these special features. But for now, keep in mind that as you're reading, ensure that you keep track of these italics, question marks, and dashes. Strategy number 6, practice your eye movement. Ultimately, any reading comprehension begins with your eye. Only when your eye can read something clearly does it get transmitted to your brain to process that information. So none of the previous 5 strategies would work if you do not read properly in the first place. The challenge on the GRE is that time is very precious. So you have to manage your time, which means that you will have about 3 to 4 minutes to read a long passage and maybe 2 to 3 minutes to read a short passage. Thus, if you are the kind of person who reads passages word by word very painfully, you will be in big trouble. So as you're practicing for the GRE, pay special attention to strategy 6, which is practice reading with your eye movement very consciously controlled. One idea here is to process blocks of word in a single glance. For example, rather than reading one word at a time, which can really slow you down, try to read at least 3 words or 4 words in one glance. What you will find is that by doing it, as your brain gets more practice, you will not lose information, you will not lose meaning, but it will dramatically improve your speed. I've shown this by an example here, but I'll also post a dedicated video module which will do a deep dive into this strategy and give you more examples so you can practice till you become perfect. Strategy 7. As you're reading the passage, you should identify GRE words and words that are synonyms and antonyms as you read. For example, you can find synonyms, antonyms, and GRE words in the passage that I've highlighted here. Inflections and intonations mean similar things. Scratches and squiggles are also the same thing. Mutable and plastic are synonyms. Plastic is an authentic GRE word. Aesthetic, occult, esoteric are all GRE words. It's important as you're reading to ensure that consciously your mind is identifying these GRE words and any synonyms or antonyms, because most likely the questions will also refer to those same things. Strategy 8. I had alluded to strategy 8 previously when I talked about continuation words and turn words. Strategy 8 is really powerful, and the basic idea is to create a bifurcation tree. What I have found is that on reading comprehension strategies, you will find that when there are a lot of turns, the GRE can really trip you up. And having a bifurcation tree can help you keep track of the road as you travel, knowing where the turns are and where there is a smooth continuity of traffic. This is a very key strategy for harder reading passages where there are a lot of turn words. As usual, I'd like to end this video by summarizing that the plan is very simple. You have 3 months. You have to focus on the official ETS material that we covered in video number 1. You have to keep practicing. And hopefully, the videos that you have at Grade Prep will help you practice more intelligently and give you the structure and systematic framework for building your vocabulary, your reading comprehension skills, your sentence completion, sentence equivalence skills, as well as provide overarching frameworks and the context to get better at analytical writing. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment on the video. More videos are coming up, so please stay tuned.